Hi, I'm Professor Tim Spector, and I'm great company.
Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome back to Great Company Podcast. New Year 2025 is going to be a big year for everyone. I got so many exciting things planned. I cannot wait to share with you. I know you probably have so many exciting plans as well. Please share them with me. I want to know exactly what they are. And let's nail 2025 together. Because it's the new year, we wanted to start off with a bang. So we decided to get on Professor Tim Spector. Now, if you don't know who Professor Tim Spector is, he is the founder of the incredible healthcare company Zoe, which went viral. Zoe helps you with nutrition. It helps you with your diet, among other things. He's a professor of twins. He's a professor of nutrition. We wanted to talk about diet and gut health and the connection between gut and brain. And one of the things I really wanted to talk about was Ozempic. That is all going to be coming up in the show today. I cannot wait for you to listen to it and let me know your thoughts. Now, if you do want to get in touch, we want to hear from you. You can send us a DM at Great Company Podcast, or you can send us an email, greatcompany@jampotproductions.co.uk. Everything is in the show description. Also, we'd love you to check out our social media channels, TikTok and Instagram. And if you haven't subscribed to this show already, please click that button. It takes 1 second and it does us wonders. It means we can keep getting amazing guests. We can keep making an incredible show and hopefully entertaining you. Okay, Happy New Year, everyone. Here's to 2025. Let's kick off the year with Professor Tim Spector on Great Company. So if you had to look back at your life and you had to tell me what's the scariest decision you've ever made, truthfully, what would it be?
When I was a junior doctor, I decided to apply for a job in Brussels as a junior doctor that involved speaking French. And I didn't really speak French, but I...
At all, or just...
No, I could read a menu.
Okay.
And I could sort of bluff, you know.
Bonjour, yeah.
Exactly. So, and at the interview, that's exactly what I did, because the interview panel of 10 eminent professors spoke less French than I did. And so I had a conversation with some old duffer that they brought out. He said, "Est-ce que vous avez appris le français, monsieur?" And I said, you know, à l'école. And they sort of clapped, and I got the job. And then I arrived in Brussels thinking I was going to have a month's induction. And basically, within half an hour, I was shown, these are my 12 patients, get on with it. And
you're kidding me.
No, they were cardiology patients, and some of them quite severely ill and stuff. So, and it was definitely that was the deep end. But I didn't. Each of these decisions, I didn't quite realize. If I'd known how scary it was, I would have prepared a bit more. But that was, I guess, because you got you can make serious mistakes. That was probably the most scary part of my life, going there. But, it is the fastest way to learn. And, when you have to. And luckily, medicine has a bit of Latin base. So a lot of the conditions had the same name. It's just, made a lot of mistakes with all the drugs and things like this that the nurses used to laugh at me. And And occasionally, when you saw the patients, they had their own words for things. So I had a great consultation with outpatients, which was even more scary because you're a bit on your own there. You can't ask anyone. And you've got to, being a doctor is all about pretending to be confident in things you don't really know much about. And this is all your training is this. And so yes. And I kept saying, and this woman kept saying she had, terrible pain, and it, and it was all coming from the mattress, and I was saying, and I kept saying, it was going on for about 5 minutes, and kept going back to this mattress business. So why don't you just change the mattress? And she looked quite shocked, and it turned out that she was talking. It was the sort of colloquial word for womb. Matrice instead of mattress. So I'd made a few cock-ups like this, and so And,
why don't you just change the mattress?
Exactly. So there were some brilliant moments like this that I couldn't really share with anybody, but years later you can still laugh, and but they were very forgiving. these patients much. And so after that time, I've always been very forgiving of anyone foreign, who doesn't speak English and trying to get by, with various colloquialisms and things like this. But yeah.
Gut I'm fascinated with, right? And I think this is one of the big things, like you said, that recently people are obsessed with, because what we're putting in our bodies affects our brain. However, you do have people who don't believe that still, and they think that there is no correlation between the gut and our brain and the decline of mental health. Can you talk to me about that and the sort of data that surrounds it?
Yes. Well, I think everyone believes there's a connection, but there'd be other scientists that said it's rather trivial and hasn't been proven yet. Whereas, and these are people who are perhaps embedded in more solid areas of science like genetics. So, well, you can explain it all. People are generally distrustful in science of new areas that they haven't been trained in. And the initial thing is you just say that's a fad, or that's driven by commercial interests. So you're creating something just in order to sell some probiotics or something. But there's no doubt there are very clear gut-brain interactions. The number of studies of probiotics against dummy placebos showing you can improve depression in patients. There are other studies showing just by improving diet of mild to moderate depressives, you can improve their symptoms to the same extent as antidepressants. And they've done lots of careful mouse studies where you can actually generate anxiety in some mice, take their poo samples, put them into other sterile mice, and those sterile mice become anxious.
Get out of here.
So in a way, yeah, anxiety and depression, are partly infectious.
What?
If you think about it in a different way, but which is a bit mind-blowing. But if you start thinking about what microbes do, they're basically chemical factories. They produce chemicals, thousands of chemicals. Some of them affect the brain, like serotonin, or there's one called GABA, which is affected when you take Valium, for example. And there are probably many others that also affect the brain. And so if your microbes are stimulated in a way that in your stool sample, it's like a soup of all these chemicals, you're putting them into someone else, those chemicals are going to reach the brain of that person or that mouse and have an effect. So it does sort of make sense once you break down this idea of difference between, poo and food and things, and just think of everything as chemicals.
For anyone who doesn't know, can you explain what serotonin is and what GABA is, just very briefly?
They're both neurotransmitters, which means that they're produced in the body, go in the blood, and they will have an effect on the brain, in that they're receptors in the brain for these things. So your brain will react to them. GABA is a key one for stress responses. So that when you're taking a Valium, benzodiazepine or a Valium, you're changing these receptors in the brain, these GABA receptors, which will just calm you down. And so the fact that our microbes are producing these is a clear evidence of this brain-gut connection. And serotonin is part of this whole process that comes from tryptophan and serotonin and then the dopamine pathways, where we have receptors for these chemicals which can change our mood, which can make us feel warm and happy, or lacking it, more depressed. And they're just two examples of the many chemicals that we still don't know about that is likely our gut are producing. And we know, for example, that nearly everyone, if you test someone with depression or anxiety, you'd have abnormal gut microbes on testing when we sequence them. You're doing something like the Zoe test, we'd see far more unhealthy microbes than healthy ones. And we realized that most of the nerve cells, the second biggest set of nerve cells, are in our gut. So our microbes are always talking to nerve cells. Mm-hmm. And it's called our second brain, is in our guts. So every time, before an exam or stress, you're getting signals from your gut that, are actually transmitted that should be in your brain, right? You're saying the two are really highly connected. And this is why we get gut feelings and, butterflies in our stomach and all these other things, because the two systems are highly connected. They're always talking to each other. And therefore, this just tells us much more that in order to help our brain, we really need to get our gut microbes in order. In order to get our gut microbes in order, producing the right chemicals, we need to feed them right. And this three-way connection is really, really important. And a lot of our current mental health issues, and there's an epidemic of them at the moment, are due to the fact that we have abnormal gut microbes producing the wrong chemicals, and our brain misinterpreting these signals and thinking that, we're actually iller than we really are. And this is this strange loop that we're probably in at the moment.
This is the beginning of the year 2025, so people are listening to it and they are in their sort of zone at the moment where they're thinking, right, new year, new me. And perhaps they are depressed, perhaps they're anxious, perhaps they're feeling low mood and they're not feeling great. You would say to that individual who's listening, first place is look at your diet and try and change that.
Absolutely, yes.
100%.
Yes. But sadly, when you go and see your GP, they're not likely to do that. So this is why you have to do this yourself. And it's particularly hard because if you are in that depressed or anxious state, often your brain switches off interest in food and you just really see it as fuel. So it's really important for also people around you or in your family to actually help someone who is in that state to eat better. And there's even evidence that if you have more severe depression and you go on antidepressants, a third of them don't work at all because you have the wrong gut microbes inside you. So they're just never going to work. The microbes are actually breaking down the antidepressant chemicals, and so they don't work. They're inactivating them. So again, really clear links between mental health, also the medications and food. But one of the most important things everyone should do if their mood is low is start to think about their diet. And this is something I wasn't really aware of until about a couple of years ago, how important it was when we first started putting people seeing what happened to people on the Zoe program. This is this personalized nutrition program, and they get a gut-friendly diet, avoid sugar spikes, fat spikes, etc. One of the first things people noticed and reported back to us when they followed the plan was their mood and energy improved. So way before anything else, before they noticed even change in constipation or weight, or even before their gut microbes, we could see a change. Mood and energy were the first things they noticed, and quite big, significant changes. And this, we've seen this throughout our studies, as how even people are shifting their whole diet, or even taking. We've got a mixture called the Daily 30, which is a high fiber prebiotic of 32 plants. We gave that in a randomized trial, and again, the most dramatic effects are on the brain rather than the rest of the body. So everything's telling us how crucial this link is between the gut and the brain, and I think it's been totally underestimated. And of course, because we have this division in medicine between the brain and the body, Psychiatrists generally who deal with depression haven't had any interest in the gut or in nutrition. And, we need to treat this, all the bits of the body in the same way and have a much more holistic approach and not see this as, that's brain disease. That's someone else's domain. It's all absolutely linked up. So anyone listening to this, absolutely, if you've got any mood, energy problems, feeling a bit low, those blues, then, first thing to try, the safest thing to try is to overhaul your diet and keep your gut microbes happy.
That's so interesting, because if you're not as sort of driven by sort of challenging the status quo, right, like yourself, and you go to the doctor and they say, well, you're depressed, you then label yourself as depressed or anxious, and you go, well, I'm just depressed and anxious, and then you just say, well, that's what I am, rather than going, well, hang on a second, maybe it's because I'm eating junk food or I'm eating something wrong or something else is there.
Absolutely, yes. And I mean,
wow, and so you're treating the wrong thing.
And anyone with gut problems knows that their mood is really low, and it's not just the physical side of it. There's something else going on that's sending signals to the brain to say, I'm sick, go into depressed mode, which, we think is a sort of protective mechanism. Evolution has given depression as a protective mechanism, says, leave me alone, my body thinks it's under attack. I'm just going to go under the duvet and stay there for a couple of weeks. So that's the sort of theory about why, humans have depression, which has some genetic basis as well.
It's an evolution thing. Same with anxiety, because you think your body thinks it's under attack, so it's the fight or flight, where you either fight it or you run because the saber-tooth tiger is coming around the corner.
Yeah, there has to be some advantage in some scenarios of it existing. Otherwise, it would have, depression wouldn't be around because it would have been outbred. Because if you're, depressed male or female and you'd spend all your time under the duvet, you're not likely to be running around having babies and keeping the genes going, no one would find you. So clearly there had to be some survival advantage to outweigh the fact that you weren't the life and soul of the party. And it's that balance that is interesting. But I think in the modern era, it's obviously quite different. Our genes were designed for a different time. And so we have to get involved in that and realize that, our brain sometimes gets it wrong, and this is a whole area I'm really interested in.
Yeah, same. I'm fascinated by the fact that with the mice who are anxious, their stool samples, their poo samples were given to other mice, and then they became anxious. So ingesting, that's wild to me.
And there are other. I mean, what we also know is that when we live with someone, we start to share their gut microbes as well. So
talk me through that. What do you mean?
We did this big study, about 20,000 people, looking at how closely they were related to other family members, whether they were brothers, sisters, parents, even twins, identical twins, and saw the sharing of their gut microbes, the species. Did they share exactly the same strains? And there's a clear link between who you're cohabiting with. So you're going to be swapping, microbes with your wife, for example. Mm-hmm. You have been exchange of them. You might have some also. If you had a dog, you might have some in common with your with your dog. So, in theory, the ability you might be able to transmit some of these mood things from one person to another. They've done studies showing you can transmit possibly some obesity or thinning microbes from one person to another as well. We don't quite know how big an effect it might be, but in theory, all this stuff is quite possible.
But it's being naive. So how do they go across? Because I understand that. So if your wife or partner or sibling or housemate is feeling depressed, you can also start to feel their emotions. So you can feel anxious or you can feel a bit low because the person that you're with is feeling that way. But how is that passed across? I just thought that was just because it was the general energy.
Well, there might be some of that, but there's also the physical side of these microscopic organisms floating around in the air that you're ingesting all the time, that you're swapping just by being in the same bedroom or bathroom as someone else. We're talking tiny amounts of these things, but the studies clearly show that cohabiting, you get very similar microbes that the rest of the population don't have. So in your household, you're going to have a unique set of microbes that you and your wife share and no one else does, because one of you had it and is giving it to the other one. We saw this in twins living together up to the age of 18. They share them, and gradually as they live apart, they lose that similarity. But living together, is definitely part of it. So some of these emotions might be driven by these microbes, which then produce chemicals, which might make you anxious or relaxed, or increase your risk of obesity, or make you more likely to lose weight. In mice experiments where they put them in the same cages, they found that actually you were better off being put in with a skinny mouse, and the skinny mouse microbes would be more effective than the obese mouse microbes. So if you're picking a friend, pick a skinny one to sit next to.
This is fascinating.
It is fascinating.
It's fascinating.
The world of microbes is this whole new world that none of us really sort of give much thought about. And we haven't been able to study it really until the last 10 years.
So microbes are almost to the point where you can feel someone's, if you feel quite relaxed around someone, or you can feel sort of anxious or whatever, it's because of their microbes almost. It goes into your body, and you can, I'm sounding like an idiot in front of you, but you know what I mean? You can start to feel that.
Yeah, well, this is all in theory. We don't know this in humans. You can only do these experiments in actual mice, because doing poo experiments in humans, you can do it, but it's quite complicated and
who would sign up to that?
Ethically tricky to say we want to give you depression or you want to do this. You can't do that. But we did study something recently. We just published last year a paper on coffee, and it just illustrates how fussy microbes are. So there's a microbe in all of us called Lawsonobacter that only drinks coffee. Okay. And if you drink coffee, you've got masses of it. Okay. It's growing, it's there, it's very happy, you're nourishing it every day, and it gets all the fiber from coffee and breaks it down, and probably helps us, reduce our fat levels and do good things for the heart. But if you're not a coffee drinker, you're a tea drinker, you still have small levels of this microbe sitting there that have been transferred perhaps from a kiss from a coffee drinker, or it's just been in the air, and it's waiting. You're not born with it. You get it as a kid, and it just sits there in this shriveled form in your gut, waiting for that first cup of coffee when it can bloom and have wild sex and carry on. So that just gives you an idea of, how detailed our gut microbes are, and how important it is to eat all these different foods, because Lawsonobacter is just the one that does coffee that we know about, but there's, thousands of others waiting for you to have these interesting foods for it to go crazy.
But teach me the understanding of that. So if I'm starving that if I'm not feeding it coffee and it's staying dormant, then what happens? Is it negative or it doesn't matter?
Doesn't seem to matter. It just it's patient. It just sits there waiting in a suspended animation form. It doesn't seem to use up much energy. It shrinks down into a small size. So microbes often can go into spore formation and spend years, just waiting.
But I don't. Now I'm going to change. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink coffee because I find that the caffeine sends me absolutely loopy. Am I missing out the fact that I'm not having sex within my body?
Yeah, I think your Lawson Bacter is very upset. They said, why is this guy, he's not being very friendly. Why can't he just have the occasional cup of coffee? And he'd be very happy if you give it decaf. So you're worried about caffeine.
Yeah.
There are thousands of other chemicals in coffee that are important, and it equally likes decaf. So give it some decaf occasionally.
So coffee is a good thing.
Coffee is a health drink. It's a good thing. It reduces your risk of heart disease by about 30%. And that's because...
Are you kidding me, Tim? What?
I'm not kidding you, no.
It reduces my chance of heart disease by 30%.
Yes.
And heart disease is one of the biggest killers, we know.
Correct. Yeah. And up between...
Can someone get me a coffee, honestly?
Yeah. The only other thing that comes close is perhaps green tea. Green tea is also good for the heart disease, perhaps slightly less of an effect, but it's also consistent. But black tea doesn't cut it. Black tea is perfectly fine. It's a healthy drink, but it doesn't seem to have those same benefits. We think that's because of the chemicals in them are different. So they're all to some extent fermented. Mm-hmm. So microbes when you take a coffee, comes off, the big pod, it gets broken in the ground, and then for several days, microbes in this hot climate, wherever they are, will then break it down into lots of different chemicals, and then you roast it, and then you grind it, etc. That gives it two things. It's got lots of fiber. Mm-hmm. A glass, a big mug of coffee has probably the same amount of fiber as an orange juice, slightly more. Mm-hmm. And it's got these natural defense chemicals called polyphenols that give it the bitterness that feed your microbes as well. So it's got, it's a perfect example of really good gut-friendly foods.
So someone listening to this right now who is starting their new year, you would say drink coffee.
Yeah, and if you don't like the caffeine, have decaf. And if you don't like the taste of coffee, go for green tea. You get, to have some similar benefits. But these are all things we're just learning about, changing the way we think about food, and that's really what I'm trying to do is move us away from this rather simplistic view of food and drink as calories and fats and sugars and all this nonsense that we've been taught for the last 50 years, and embrace the fascinating complexity of it and realize it's one of the most exciting areas of science today, rather than, what I was taught, it's the most boring.
Speaking of disease, there's a rise of bowel cancer in young people. Why is this?
Oh, this is interesting. It's a study we're doing, a part of a big $30 million study with the US that I'm leading the UK arm of, and it's there are lots of theories for this, and part of the study is to really try and crack it down. One is pollution, things like microplastics in the air, things that we haven't really been studied properly, and we don't know we know that they're around, we don't know how big those effects are. It could be other pollutants that we know about, such as from traffic, diesel, etc. Or it could be, again, due to our poor diets affecting our gut microbes, because there are increasing correlations between certain gut microbes and cancer. That if you have a certain microbe in you, you have like a 10-fold increase of getting colon cancer in the next 5 years. And we don't know whether that is actually causal, or it might be a very early sign. We don't know if the microbe's causing it, or just a microbe that happens to live once the cancer's started, because some of these cancers can be around a long time in microscopic amounts that you can't see. So we're exploring all this stuff, but I think the microbiome has got to be the main driver of this. And I think poor diets is the most likely thing that's changed in young people.
When we say the rise of bowel cancer, what are the stats? Like how many people, how young?
There aren't clear, precise stats on this, but if you speak to colorectal surgeons, it used to be incredibly rare below the age of 40. And increasingly, they're seeing this from the age of 20. So this whole new group of people coming forward, because they used to say there's no point screening anyone until you're in this country over 60. It's earlier in other countries, but it's clear there isn't a clear line as there used to be. And so it's just that they kept seeing more and more younger cases occurring. They're still rare, so they're still less than 1% of the total, but colon cancer is one of the most common cancers that people get and die from. So total numbers are actually large. Yeah. So again, these are sort of new conditions that a bit like, but if you think of what are the new conditions that are happening in young people that weren't around 50 years ago, IBS is another one that's really common now that was really rare. Food allergy. Mm-hmm. When I went to school, there wasn't a single person in my school with a food allergy. Now it's pretty hard to find someone who hasn't got a food allergy.
Even in restaurants, do you have any allergies? That's the first thing they ask.
You know what I say when the waitress or waitress asks me? I said, no, I'm too old. And it's absolutely true. They just stop asking people if you're, over 50, you haven't got an allergy. Under 50, you probably have, It's like,
wow.
This huge cutoff. And you say, well, how did that happen? So I think when you start thinking of these, these allergies, these weird cancers, IBS, so these mental health conditions, you start to think, what could be a common factor? The most likely is our diet.
What is your idea of diets? Do you think they're a good thing or are they a bad thing?
Well, the word diet to me conjures up a bad thing.
Why?
Because it's like a punishment. It's like, okay, it's January. I'm feeling a bit chubby, a bit slothful. I'm going to go for the next month. I'm, not going to eat any carbs, or I'm just going to have some product out of, powdered low calorie soup. I'm going to go on the cabbage diet and fart myself to death. I'm just going to eat raw liver.
Liver.
These are what traditionally been these diets that people said, oh, you can reset your body, and the diet industry has been conning us for 60 years into the idea that you can do something temporary and it's going to have some magical effect on your body, and it's all complete bollocks. I mean, and because these short-term fixes just don't work. You have to have a long-term approach to this, and the body reacts brilliantly every time you restrict the calories to any meaningful way. Your body ramps up the hunger levels and it reduces your metabolism, so you don't burn up the energy as you should do.
Explain that in simple terms for someone who doesn't understand. What does that mean?
If you say the normal female will be eating 2,000 calories a day, and you're going to go on a special diet, you've seen something in a magazine and says, okay, we're going to go on the 1,200 calorie diet, okay, eating whatever it is, or it comes in a magic powder or whatever. So every day you have 1,200 calories. So therefore, the theory is you've got 800 calories less every day. You should be losing, you lose a kilo a week, and you do that for 10 weeks, you lose 10 kilos. That's the theory. The reality is that you'll lose for the first 2 weeks, and then your body says, hang on a minute, if this continues, we're not going to have much left. We need to change the thermostat here so that we're not burning energy at the same rate. We're going to shut down all the body systems so that they're running much slower, much more efficiently. And so we can get by on less calories. Okay, so we're not going to start damaging our muscles or lose anything essential. So your metabolic rate really drops. So you just totally relaxed all the time. Probably means you also get a bit tired because your brain says, if you want to save energy, just go and lie on the sofa, right? Don't do anything too much. So you feel a bit lethargic. Your metabolic rate goes down. So that means your rate of loss of weight won't go at the same rate. It starts to balance up. And at the same time, in your brain, your hunger levels are ramped up. So appetite is switched on massively. So that the longer it goes on, you're getting an extra sort of 5% every week of the hunger level. So every time you walk past the fridge, that signal to open the fridge and, have some ice cream or something gets more and more intense. And so these two things conspire so that after about 4 to 6 weeks, when you've achieved some weight loss, it becomes absolutely irresistible. You can't lose much more because your metabolic rate is really low, and it's so tempting to go back to that fridge because of the appetite signal is just focusing on eat more all the time. You just wake up and say, visions of your fridge. So that's what the reality is, and that's why we need to be focusing on, and we talk about this in the book, about quality of food, not calories.
Wow.
Because you need to be changing the message to your brain, particularly on appetite. You need to not do this suddenly, and that's why this book is full of 100 healthy recipes that they're generally going to be good for your gut health, your blood. You're not going to get sugar spikes, not going to get fat spikes, but they're in abundance. There's you can have as much as you like, and because they're full of fiber, they're full of things that fill you up more, that will not stimulate your appetite signals, will not cause inflammation, not mess up your gut microbes. And I think that's what people need to understand, is there's no point in doing a 1 month diet. I really don't believe in them unless you're going to address the quality issues and these other long-term ones, because you need to change the way you're thinking about food for decades. The idea of these quick fixes every January with a reset is patently failed. You only got to look around you and see how many people are overweight and obese who do these regular purges, these punishment diets. The only people it helps are, diet companies and gyms and people selling slim fast products and other such rubbish. Focusing on the quality of food, not calories, is key, and that will change. And also eating times and things like this. Not only what you eat, it's how you eat. Spending more time over it, giving your body time to feel full, giving your gut a rest overnight. This time restricted.
But if you had to sort of structure someone's day and what they should eat, what would you say that looked like?
Well, first I say no one's day is going to be exactly the same. And what I want people to do is to experiment. Okay? Don't believe everything you've been told. Don't believe what your mum told you. You may be someone that doesn't need breakfast, right? You may be someone like me that eats their breakfast after 10:30, 11.
I do that, yeah.
Or you might be someone that really is super hungry as soon as you wake up, and therefore you need something and you need to be eating regularly. There are perhaps, 3 groups of people. So find out which one you are, but use breakfast as the best time to experiment. So, an experiment with different foods. That's why we set up Zoe, to see whether you better with carbs or fats. But if you can't, afford Zoe at the moment, then just experiment yourself with different breakfasts and see how you feel 3 hours later. Do you feel lethargic? Do you feel energized? listen to your body much more, because I think we've not been told to do that. So that's really important. And then, but I would advise everybody, whether they're having breakfast or not, to give themselves a longer break overnight for the gut to recover, which means don't do late night snacks. No late night kebab on the way home.
Damn it.
No bickies and milk, just as you're going to bed. All these things are really not ideal. You want to get all your snacking in around your meals if you're going to, and give your gut and your gut microbes the time to recover, because they, again, super specialized teams come out at night and repair your gut, and they really help your immune system. And we think that's really important for your metabolism and energy levels, etc. So I feel much better since I've started doing that, and many other people do as well. So think about the timing of your food as well as the quality of your food.
What are your thoughts on Ozempic?
I have mixed thoughts on it. I think it's an amazing blockbuster drug that when I was doing genetics, that was what we were trying to achieve, right? So every genetic scientist would have loved to have found the gene that ended up this drug that can reduce 20% of body weight with relatively few side effects, and reduce heart disease, cancer, and dementia over 5 years, by sort of halving these rates. So it's an incredible set of drugs, these GLP-1 drugs, and there's many more. And we're going to see more of them, combinations. We're going to see tablet form coming out soon. So they're here to stay.
Wow.
So for anyone who is obese, anyone with diabetes, they are life-changing. People forget that someone living with obesity has a worse prognosis than the average cancer in terms of longevity. So we're changing that. So that's really important on that one side. On the other side, I don't think, celebrities using it, who might have, the odd love handle or something they're not happy about, I think is very dangerous, because about 1 in 6 people do have side effects with it.
And what are the side effects?
Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea are quite common. And then less common, you can have inflammation of your pancreas, pancreatitis. You can have, there's some rare cancers you can get in your gallbladder. So, it's like any drug, there are side effects. But the studies, and as it goes out more in the wider population, you'll see more side effects than in the very controlled randomized trials where they sort of selected people very carefully. So I think we have to assume it's here. We've got to live with it. We've got to work out how we're going to deal with it as society. But it shouldn't be used by, say, a government to ignore the whole obesity question of why we're producing so many obese individuals that need these drugs, why the food companies are feeding us up so that pharmaceutical companies can then
lower us down
again. So we've got to be, at the same time as using for the people who have obesity now, we should be trying to stop the flow in the future. And that's something that the last 20 years of government have failed to do dramatically. And that's what we desperately need, and particularly for our children who are these future patients of Ozempic. How do we stop that flow, which we know we can? It makes no sense, because it would also bankrupt the country. I mean, at the moment, I think it's 1 in 6 Americans have tried Ozempic already.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and so that's what's coming our way.
What?
They're used to paying for it themselves, or their plans. Hardly anyone in this country has used it, relatively, but you can see the direction of
1 in 6 in America.
Yeah. I mean, 1 in 3 are obese, so that's
Okay.
That's
All right.
that's telling you that 50% of obese individuals have tried it.
Is there an impact on one's mental health using Ozempic?
Anecdotally, there are stories, but there's not much good data as far as I know, other than there are some strange effects. It seems to have effects on the brain that reduce addiction. So it can stop smokers, for example, craving nicotine. It can stop gamblers wanting to bet in the races.
That's insane.
It can be maybe affecting these sort of hedonistic, addictive centers of the brain, which on the one hand is good if you to get rid of some of those behaviors. At the same time, it makes you slightly concerned there might be some long-term changes to your personality or anything that could go on if it does do that. So I don't think we know enough about it yet.
We were speaking before and you mentioned ultra processed foods, and you said that 60% of the UK's diet is ultra processed foods.
Yeah, that's correct, which is the worst in Europe.
And for children, it's
something like it's over 70%, and the latest survey showed that was even higher than in the United States. So that's the highest in the world.
Tim, what is happening? Why is that happening in the UK?
The food industry has found that the UK is its best market. It's where they've managed to infiltrate themselves into government and all walks of life. And we are a population and a culture that has welcomed ultra-processed foods and cheap, available, convenient foods more than virtually anywhere else in the world. So it's a combination of all these factors, and we didn't have a strong food culture that was preventing it, like you might get in Mediterranean countries or Asian countries that have their own special cuisine. So we've embraced anything new, good or bad, and it turns out that we've been made slowly more and more addicted to these products, and they've been lobbying governments to make sure that nothing prevents this slow increase and rise. And as they've they've maximized eating as foods, they've tried to make us convinced that we need extra food meal times. So that's why all these mid-morning snacks and these afternoon snacks and these late-night snacks have come in.
You have some really early research about UPFs. What can you tell us about it? What are they doing to our bodies?
They act in a number of ways on our bodies. We don't know which mechanism is the most important, but probably they act so that we overeat. So studies have shown that eating identical foods as ultra-processed or not makes you overeat by about 25%. That's their key property. Now, how they do that is by first they're very soft, so you eat them fast. They're like baby food. You don't actually have to chew them, and that's why children's jaws are actually getting smaller. And as dentists are reporting, there's enough room in the mouth for teeth, because they're not chewing like we were evolved to. So jaw sizes have got smaller. So we're eating baby food. Many people, particularly in deprived areas, won't have had breast milk. They'll have had formula feed. So they're basically ultra-processed food all their life, which is a continuation of baby food. So this baby food gets absorbed very quickly, and you can ingest a lot of it before there's any signal going to your brain to say, I'm full. So that's one mechanism, just as a physical one. The other is that it lacks fiber. So the thing they don't like to put in is fiber, because fiber fills you up, so that you don't get those triggers from the fiber and the other real nutrients. And it also generally doesn't reach the gut microbes. So diets like this, totally lacking in fiber, won't help your gut microbes, so you get a denuded set of gut microbes as well. So you're only, perhaps a third less species than someone who's eating things with fiber in it. And then you've got the other chemicals in there that make this fake food seem real. So you've got glues like emulsifiers and gums, and you've got preservatives, you've got colorants, and you've got artificial sweeteners, all of which have been shown to harm the gut microbes, that they're in evolution not used to dealing with these totally artificial products you don't find in nature. And so they form abnormal chemicals that might send signals being pro-obese, making you put on weight or giving you diabetes. So it's a combination of these factors that makes you overeat them. And about 1 in 8 people are addicted to them. So their brain lights up when they get these foods, and that's because they have brilliant chemists working for these companies, because they pay them 3 times more than they would get in universities, and they work out the exact amount of sugar, fat, and salt you need to tickle the brain, and they're doing brain scans to work out exactly
Get out of here.
how much that combination is that, again, you didn't find in nature. And, we've all faced it, that pack of biscuits, those, potato-ish snacks that, you can only have one, so you can't just have one of it. They really are moreish. You want to go back and they are delicious. But you also know, like, I think the best example is something called Pringles, which I used to eat a lot of, but I realized they were making me sick.
How much were you eating?
Well, I had too many, obviously, but if I had one, I was okay. But you can't just have one. And after you had about 6 or 10 of them, the chemical flavors started overcoming you, and you really felt quite nauseated. But some people just keep going because this addictive quality of these foods. It's the more you get into it, the more frightening it is. And basically, the UK has been used as this massive experiment. And the food companies absolutely love the UK, and they control the government. They've controlled the nutrition committees that advise the government. Nearly the majority of people on those committees have received money or funds or grants from these big companies. And it's entirely corrupt. But I think people are talking about it more, and there was a big Lord's inquiry last year, which I was a part of, which the government is going to answer soon, which pointed this out and came out very strongly to say we do need protection. We need government protection against these companies, against this food environment. It's not about individuals lacking willpower. Some people have no choice. They're just surrounded by all these foods. There's no fresh food. It's a very uneven playing field because these foods get cheaper, and real food and farming,
easier.
Real food and farming, and getting the real stuff gets more expensive.
And so these companies are literally killing us.
Yes,
that is frightening.
But it is frightening, but it's not unexpected. When cigarettes started to take a hit, the cigarette companies started investing in these food companies. And so the same people in the 1970s and 1980s, those same tactics that worked so well for cigarettes for so long
Get out of here,
are now
Tim.
working in the food industry.
It's not that tactical.
It is, yes.
What?
They know exactly what they're doing. And
it's sinister.
They don't want to add healthy stuff to it. It was very interesting. I heard of a beer company that experimented. They wanted to do the right thing. Yeah. And they said, let's add some fiber to our beer to see if this could be a nice, healthy way of getting fiber. So they added some soluble fiber in there, and it tasted great, no problems. But they did some taste tests, and people were drinking 20% less because it filled them up. So they had to get rid of it.
Because they weren't drinking enough.
So even if one food company wants to do the right thing, and there was a head of one of the companies, Danone, wanted to start making healthy food, but they started losing money, and so he got sacked by the shareholders. So it needs the government to come in and say, we've got these rules, you all got to stick to it, because these companies just they want to make money. They're companies. That's what they do.
Wow.
We shouldn't expect otherwise. If we're so gullible as to pretend they would be working in our interest.
But if you're an individual, right, listening to this again, and you can't afford Zoe for whatever reason, and it's the new year and you can't get that, and you're surrounded by UPFs and there is no fresh food and that's expensive, what choice do you have? What do you do?
Well, you choose the least bad UPF, and things like lots of canned products that are cheap. For 40 pence you can buy a can of beans, and you're getting all protein and fiber and nutrients in that in a way that just takes 2 minutes to cook and eat. So I don't think there's any case where you don't have access to some good food. You may not know what it is, and you may need educating to think good food doesn't have to be a fresh, expensive steak. It can be a bag of frozen peas. It can be, some frozen spinach. It can be various beans. Even, there are some baked beans that are relatively healthy. So that's hopefully what I'm trying to get people to do, is think about food differently, and especially if you move away from meat, and you pick your vegetables carefully, you can eat well on a budget.
Do you eat meat?
I do eat meat once or twice a month.
That's it?
That's it, yes. I did go completely meat-free for about 6 years.
Yeah.
I got a bit of B12 deficiency, and I got fed up with taking vitamins. So I find having an occasional bit of meat sorts that out for me. And I'm nothing against people doing that, having occasional bits of high-quality meat. But I really am against people having regular, low-quality meat, because not only is it bad for your health and takes up room on the plate where you can't put healthy plants, but it's the worst thing you can do for the planet. As individuals, it's not about giving up your car. As individuals, if we want to make a statement about climate change, we should be reducing our red meat intake.
Can you reverse the impacts of consuming UPFs?
Absolutely, yes.
You can.
The beautiful thing about the gut microbiome is whatever state you're in, you can reverse it and make changes within a few weeks.
That quickly?
Yes. So, and this is what we've seen in the Zoe studies, is that the microbiome is improving rapidly, and the worse you are when you start, the quicker that happens. And it can happen at any age, whether you're 20 or 80. We can all improve our gut microbes, and everything is very positive, because I used to write about genetics and changing your genes. You can't change your parents very easily, and this is really important that everyone can improve their gut microbes, and if they improve their gut microbes, everything else flows from that. Their immune system's better, their mood's better, their brain's better, they'll feel better, get less diseases, less inflammation. Everyone should be trying this and feeling positive about a change, particularly in January.
Tim, we've spoken about so much, your book. We haven't even really touched on Zoe, the business that you co-founded. And it's the beginning of the year, right? People are wanting to change themselves. They want to better themselves, especially in diet, as we've been speaking about. They can get your book, but if someone wants to get Zoe, why would you say it's a good thing?
I think it's the best way to fully understand your body and how you respond to food. It's a fantastic educational tool, because as you learn about your body, you start to learn how food affects you. There's nothing quite like when you put that glucose monitor on your arm, you see how your average breakfast of muesli or orange juice affects you. And, from that point on, you'll never think of that food in the same way again.
So just quickly to caveat that, so you put it onto your arm. You have the app. You go onto the app, and it shows you the spikes that you have in glucose or different areas that it affects you, right?
Yes, I mean this is just one of the, just to dial back a bit. If you purchase the Zoe program, you're getting separate tests. You're getting a glucose monitor, which measures your sugar spikes after a set meal. You get a little thing that captures your blood painlessly through a vacuum, which measures your blood fat after a meal to see how much fat is left floating around in your blood 6 hours afterwards. And you get a microbiome test, and through a stool test, which is done genetically. And those three are put together to then, as an algorithm, to go into an app, which you then use to log your meals, to plan your meals, to get recipes, to really change the way you think about food long term. And you can keep checking in to see how you're doing and what your average score is for the week, etc. So it's pushing you in certain directions based on your own biology, and then you can get a retest of your gut health to see, have you improved in 6 months, etc., etc. And we've done a big randomized trial of this because most of these plans never get tested properly, but we're based on science, so we test everything, and clear difference between government type diets, which tell you to reduce your calories and eat more fruit and vegetables. The Zoe program was far superior to that in all these domains, particularly as we mentioned things like mood and energy, and as well as a little bit of weight loss. So that's what people learn from it. And it's very educational, I think, and for many people it is transformative. They've said it completely changed the way I think about food in their life. So if you value your health and your food, then I think it's an investment worth making. We also have another product for people who want the simple approach. It's something called Daily 30. We have 32 freeze-dried foods, plants, and 6 fungi that you can just add to your food, your whatever, sprinkle it over your breakfast every day. And we've shown that if you do that, again, you get significant improvements in your gut microbiome, even more than a probiotic.
Wow.
So that's an easy, I wouldn't want people to stop there, but at least they can see, well, I can take this stuff that is giving me some diversity, because 32 plants, we want people to get at least 30 plants a week. Some people find that difficult. This is a way to, nudge you towards that goal, at least make you think about food differently and about particularly supplements differently, because it's a whole food supplement. It's not a chemical powder that you have to sort of froth up and mix and, smells weird. This is real food. Also, we have quite an instructional podcast about nutrition.
It's amazing.
Every week. That's doing very well, the Zoe podcast. And that's free for everybody. And
it's a fantastic podcast. Tim, I feel very inspired to kick off my 2025 in a good way. We like to end the conversation with 8 questions. Are you ready for this?
No.
Good. What's a saying or phrase that you'd want people to take away from this interview and conversation?
The food choices you make every day are the most important you can make for your health.
Best compliment anyone's ever given you for your work?
The Queen giving me an OBE for COVID.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Which was a real surprise, because I thought everyone hated me, particularly the government. So yeah, that was a shock.
Just quickly on that. Why did you think everyone hated you?
Zoe during COVID was an anti-government alternative view of the information. We were doing stuff that the government wasn't doing properly. They wanted to shut us down. They refused to endorse us. And we kept going, and we had a huge following and many supporters. And I'll always be probably most proud of what we did in that. And I think I still get people coming up to me in the street saying, thank you for what you did. You saved my mental health.
Wow.
Just by feeling we could contribute, because people every day were reporting their symptoms and in their area, and getting feedback. And so we had it was an incredible feeling, incredible time. Really restored my faith in the public, really, that it's a perfect example of how it can work and could work in the future, in the next pandemic.
No, don't say that, Tim. What scares you most about your research?
That it's always going to get more and more complicated, and I'll never find the truth.
When was the last time you cried?
Either watching a film on the plane, which for some reason on a plane, I blub on a plane.
Everyone, I don't know why.
It's something about altitude, perhaps, that just sort of releases those glands. But more sadly, it was probably the funeral of Michael Mosley, who was a friend of mine. And there was a private funeral that was very moving.
What is something that you can't let go of?
My latest idea.
What's something that people are most embarrassed to admit with gut health?
No one likes to talk in this country about how many poos they have a week, whereas
I'm fine with it.
In Belgium, they couldn't stop telling you or bringing you samples.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Look at this one. This is a bit green, isn't it? That's a bit yellow. No. And in England, it's, I never look down.
Tim, my wife sent off a stool sample and she sent it to the wrong address, so it got sent back to her 2 weeks later. So posted through the door was a sample of her poo. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, poo in the post. It's a whole new concept.
What turns you off?
Anything that's too boring and obvious and administrative.
What turns you on?
Any new idea. I'm easily excited by new thoughts, hypotheses, and how the body works.
What do you like most about yourself?
That I'm easily bored.
Love that. That's my favourite. That's so good. Tim, thank you so much. That's fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on Great Company. That was amazing. Thank you. That was so good.